All right, this is going to be episode 8 on this LS9 Nightmare. We got the one under rod bearings in, and Andrew stuck them in some rods, and we checked them, and that fixed our clearance problem. So we've got everything loaded up. We got to put the rings on the pistons, so hang loose, and we're going to get into all that, and we'll try to get the short block together. All right, so get all my junk organized here. So we got the clearance down from like 2.6, 2.8 down to like 2.2. So the clearance is good on the rods. All the rods are on the pistons and all the bearings are in the rods. We got to load all of the we got to load up all the rings. I just wiped all the rings down. So that's what we got off the rings. I wiped them all down with mineral spirit. So remember, not only do you need to clean your cylinders and your blocks and all that, but, even new parts, we wipe everything down because, it's a manufactured part and a lot of stuff's super clean and a lot of stuff's not super clean. So, but it needs to be. So we will put all our oil rings on, and if you've seen the 5.3 build, I went through how we put rings on, and I'm going to show you again, I guess. We'll do one or two here on camera, and then I'll knock the rest out. So the oil scraper expander, so we put it on first. This ain't no stroker, so the wrist pin is not up in the oil ring land. But if you've seen stroker pistons, it'll have a support rail that bridges the gap on stroker pistons when the wrist pin breaks into the oil ring land. So always remember that, if you need that. So I always put the scraper, the expander right on the wrist pin. And then I'll take my bottom rail, and I usually put it about the beginning of the skirt on one side, and then I'll turn 180 degrees and do the exact same thing again, but on the top side. That's just one. So right there about the start of the skirt profile, and just running it around. And so that's how I do them. And so hang loose, and I'm gonna load all these, and then we'll come back on the second ring. All right, on these second rings, again, these are, you probably won't be able to see it, but these are Napier, so it's got an actual hook on the face, and there's writing on the top side, so you know that the writing goes up on all of these. Everybody's brand is the same that I've seen. So just like on a stock deal, we just hang it in, and then pretty much, you could just walk it right around. And then, when you get right here at the end, I just grab it and pull it over so it don't scratch up the side of the piston. But if it does, it doesn't matter. But I just like to try not to do that if I possibly can. And then on the top ring, the face profile, as far as I know, on everybody's top ring, the face profile is a radius. So it doesn't matter if it goes this way or this way. But yeah, if you look, and I remember back in the day, they would have some really heavy chamfers, but you can see the writing on the top here, and the inner diameter has a pretty heavy chamfer on the inside, on the upside. So the chamfer goes up and the writing goes up. The bottom doesn't have nearly as much chamfer. And so that's how old cast rings were back in the day. They would put a really big heavy chamfer on the top. So again, I line my gap up with the wrist pin on one side and with the wrist pin on the other. same deal. Just hang it, and she'll just roll right around, go right on there. And that's a loaded piston. So I'm gonna load the rest of them, and then we'll be back, get ready to push them in the holes. All right, so yeah, so I got my adjustable ring expander. This one's like, what is it, 4 and 80 bore, so I don't have a rigid 4 and 80 bore. I got a 65 and a 70. So, but this adjustable one works just fine for the most part. Except when I get the rings jacked up. All right, here we go. All right, so I got my tranny fluid. I like tranny fluid on the cylinders and the rings. And I'm trying to put my piston in upside down. That's not what you want. Just like that. And then we'll get a rod cap. Just a little bit of assembly lube. And we will snug her down. So a lot of people don't know if you can see that groove between the top and the second ring. So we call it an accumulator groove now, and that's what it's doing. It's accumulating the gas that is between the two rings, and that helps the second ring to stop fluttering, and that's why we run more gap on the second ring than the top ring to help whatever is trapped escape. But a lot of people don't know that Grumpy Jenkins, and you young whippersnappers who probably don't even know who Grumpy Jenkins is, but Grumpy put that groove in pistons back in the day himself because it didn't exist. So in the early days, that was called a Grumpy groove, and he kind of engineered that, and then it worked, and it you know, his cylinders sealed better because the ring wouldn't flutter. And then as time went on, all the piston manufacturers pretty much adopted that. So today, if you buy a set of performance pistons from just about anybody, it'll have a groove between 1 and 2 almost every single time. That's just some history for you. And it don't take a lot. I just put a little bit on the skirt, a little bit on the rings, and I already got some in the cylinders. And put a little assembly lube in the rod. Then we'll go over here and knock her in the hole. And I did look, the piston oilers cleared the pistons really good, so all of that stuff was happy together, so we didn't have to do anything to the squirters. But I have had, I don't know why, I have had a lot of import stuff that just, the piston squirters and the pistons, they were just not happy. It's like they didn't put the groove in exactly the right place or something, because I always have to move them around. But but these were perfect. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and knock the next one in on this side and knock one in on the other side, and then we're gonna check the clearance between the rods, and I'll bring you back and show you that, because I don't want to bore you to death me just knocking pistons in. All right, so we got, so that's 25. So we got 25 gap. I like to see a minimum of like 15-ish, give or take. But I mean, 30 wouldn't be the end of the world, but anywhere between 15 and probably 35 is fine. You know, and like I don't know if you've seen the oil pump, oil pressure video, but just like we was talking about, or I was talking about in the video, so come over here, Andrew. So obviously you got all of this clearance between two rods, right? So all of that oil that's going in the rod is coming out of this side, between the two rods, and out of this side the whole time it's rotating. It's just, because again, we got to get the oil into the rod and out of the rod because that's how it stays cool. We got to move it through the system, just like, you know, in a radiator. So if we keep the same oil, if it's super tight and it can't get out, and we keep the same oil in this journal, then the oil overheats and then it breaks down and then it can't lubricate, or it foams up, or whatever it is that happens to it happens. So all right, I'm gonna knock these other 4 in, and then we'll bring you back when we torque them all. All right, so that torques all the rods. So the only thing we got left is the cross bolts, and I usually do the cross bolts when we get ready to put the pan and stuff on, but I mean, it feels really nice. So I'm happy with that. Let me roll it over here. One thing I do need to check is the piston protrusion, because we did have to cut it a lot. Let me find my deck bridge gauge. So that's 7. And that's like 8.5, so we'll call it 7.5 out of the hole, that's good. I'm happy with that. Well, it helps if I'm actually on it. And that's like 7.5. So it's square. I mean, which we knew it was square. We decked it on the mains. So that's good. We'll run like a 51. We'll just run a standard 51 gasket, and that'll still give us, I mean, ultimately we'll have what, 40, 42, 43 quench. So, you know, that's perfectly fine. I need to go ahead. I ain't ground the cam yet, but we own LS cams now, and so I think we'll just hold the video. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish the cam in the grinder, and then I'm gonna go ahead and grind the cam for this thing, and then we'll just hold this video and get the cam in, and we'll go ahead and go through degreeing it and all that jazz. So through the magic of editing, we'll be right back with a camshaft. All right, so I got the camshaft ground this morning. I got to run over and put it in the cam doctor and make a cam report for it and get it washed, and then we'll get it, we'll bring you back then, and we'll get it stuck in the engine, and then we'll go through degreeing it and all that jazz. All right, so we got the cam is ready to go in, so we're gonna put a little assembly lube on the mains, and we'll get it slid in. Let me grab a retainer plate. Man, we're having all kind of technical difficulties. Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and then our campground went down a couple of days. Hold on just a minute and I'll get you up. Uh-huh.
Okay, so this thing had this adjustable timing set to adjust the intake center line, but I just don't like these things. They just cheesy. The bushing, you can see the bushing, it's kind of wobbly, and the holes are slotted, and to me it's just a place for bad stuff to happen. And I feel like, in my opinion, unless you're doing something goofy, and this is goofy because these factory cranks, they put a keyway like here. So what I've done, like with LS7s, because this thing's got a drive some point. Let me grab a timing gear. It'll make more sense. So this is a good gear, like that comes with our Gen 4 timing set. And it's 9 keyways, and it'll advance or retard 8 degrees in 2-degree increments. The problem is with this system, the way it goes together, and you see how short it is. So this is for a standard LS. Well, on these, because you got all of this space and you only have 1 keyway out here, if you put this on way back here, it just don't work, right? There's no keyway for it. So on the LSAs and the LS9s, it's that way. On the LS7, it's not. So on the LS7, what I've been doing is I just take this whole system here, this factory, and I just put it in the lathe, and I turn that gear off, and whatever this thickness is, I don't remember. I just turn that much off, and then I can put this gear on and then use this factory oil pump drive and spacer to make all that work out and still have an adjustable timing gear. But because the way this keyway is done, the only real solution would be you'd have to add this keyway in the back to be able to run this kind of gear, or you're stuck running this fixed bottom drive gear combo. So, but the only time it matters is if the intake center line is off and you need to adjust it, right? So pretty much, I mean, we are not without fault, but pretty much we got our system down, and if we want the intake center line to be X, I can put it there without any trouble. So we're fixing to degree this cam, and I'm sure it's going to be fine. But if it's off, we'll go to plan B, but I don't expect it to be off. And I tell most people, as long as the camshaft is within a degree of what the manufacturer specifies the intake center line, then I don't really worry about it. I mean, a degree just, it's fine. But if it's a couple of degrees off, then it's probably worth adjusting a little bit, because it will make, the intake closing event is really important for dynamic compression. So the later that event happens, the lower your compression will be. So I always try to make sure my intake closing is where it's supposed to be. All right, give me just a second. We're going to get all of the degree and stuff plopped on here, and then we'll go over, we've done it before, but we're just going to do a little refresher on setting up the degree wheel stuff, and then we'll degree this cam and see where it actually is. All right, so the wheel's on. We got it roughly at top dead center. We put the pointer on 0. We got our indicator on. We're going to use the indicator method this time because somebody can't find the positive piston stop. We're not going to call no names right now. So we've got 0 established, and then we'll go over, I think I've done this on film. I don't know, but we're going to go over how to use the indicator to find top dead center regardless. So let me get this turned a little better. All right, so we're going to go, so we just make sure the indicator is on 0 at the highest point, and it is. So we're going to drop down some given amount, and that's 50. So if we look, that's 12 degrees. All right, so we're going to go 50 the other way, and that is also 12 degrees. So we have found top dead center. So 0 is 0. Now, if it was off, if this was 12 and this was 14, then 13 would be top dead center, and both sides would need to read 13 instead of 12 and 14 or whatever. So we'll go back to 0. All right, Everybody's still 0. So that's good. And so now we're going to take this rig off, but we're not going to go anywhere with it. We're going to stick it right back on here because we're going to use it to put on the push rod for the. All right, so let me grab a lifter. So we'll just take a standard GM lifter. And then we will grab us a push rod. Aha, I just found the piston stop. It's over here by the toolbox. Hold it. Try to hold it square with itself. Oh, yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah, I mean, try to have the push rod relatively square. I mean, you don't want it off, you know, in fantasy land somewhere. All right, so we're gonna bring it up to maximum lift, which is right there. And I'm gonna do just a little small adjustment, I think. All right. So we 0. All right, we're going, in the direction of rotation, we're going to pull down to 50. All right, so that is 154. Let me go on and make a note here. And again, it's not ultra critical. Everybody uses 50, but it's not a got to. You can use 30 or 100 or whatever suits you. Now this way we go beyond 50 and come back just because of the slack in the timing set. And I mean, this one don't have any slack, but still, that's 71, yeah. Equals, and then you divide that number by 2, which is 112.5. It was supposed to be 112, so we within a half a degree of where we want to be, so that's perfectly acceptable. And like I say, pretty much I would say most any reputable cam grinder is going to be able to put your intake center line where it's supposed to be. Where you run into problems is the timing set or the keyway in the crankshaft. But most of the time I find that if it's off, it's in the timing set for the most part. Because anybody that, you know, anybody manufacturing cams that understands anything, we can check the dimension from the number 1 intake lobe to the dial pin and know that the intake center line is right. So we can verify that information. So if we know the camshaft is correct and it's wrong in the engine, then pretty much without fail, it's gonna be the timing set almost every time. And I had when I first started grinding, I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail, but when I first started grinding, I had a guy call me and said, hey man, this is a solid small block Chevrolet. He called me and said, hey man, this thing's off 8 degrees. And I'm just like, there's no way. I mean, it's just impossible. And because, like I say, we check this stuff. We know the dimension from, or the degrees from the intake, the number one intake to the dial pin. I mean, we just know what it is. And so when it left here, I mean, it was dead nuts. I got records on it, you know. And so we go back and forth, and I'm like, look, man, just try another timing set. And he was sure that it wasn't a timing set. And about an hour and a half later, he called me back. He's like, yep, you was right. He said, it's dead on. He said, I put another timing set on, and it's perfect. So, and I've even seen some high dollar timing sets where they broached the keyway, the bottom gear keyway. I had one, I don't know, it was a couple of years ago. It actually had one keyway and then right beside it another keyway. I mean, they stuffed two keyways side by side. So, you know, how in the world? And the bad thing is, you know, it's they put both gears in the chain, and they put a rubber band around the chain, and then they put it in a bag, and then they put it in a box. So, you know, somebody, at least one person, handled it 2 or 3 times after it was broached, and or multiple people handled it depending on how their packing station works. So, you know, nobody caught that. I mean, that's pretty scary, but unfortunately that's the world we live in. So anyway, so the intake center line's good, all of that's happy. So what we're gonna do next, we're gonna tear all of this off, and I think we're gonna end the video there because it's getting kind of long. We're gonna tear all this off, and then they probably be one more episode, and then we'll put the covers on, we'll get the heads popped on, get the rockers, all that jazz. But, you know, we are on the home stretch on this thing. We just like basically the covers, the cylinder heads, rocker arms. We got to measure for push rod length. We'll go through all of that, how to come up with your push rod length and the right lifter preload and all that jazz. I may even do a sectional video from this last video about push rod preload and measuring push rods, because that's another one of them phone calls we get 40 times a day. So, all right, we're going to call it. We appreciate you watching. All the comments, it's great. Like, share, subscribe. Check out the website if you need anything, powellmachininc.com. We'll see you on hopefully the next and last episode.